Hello and welcome to my first vlog of this week, the fourth week in September 2021. I'm recording this today freshly buzzcut because both the hairdressers in my town closed down, sadly, during COVID. And for me now to get a haircut is like a half-day event, and I can't give half-day at the moment because I'm too busy at work. And I really hate like giving my weekends over to them as well. So bought some shears, and now I look like a 1980s football hooligan. So that's nice for you all. Won't last too long though, because my hair does tend to grow quite quickly. So I'm sure I'll be back at a very standard grade 4 buzz cut before too long. Anyway, enough about my grooming. Let's discuss BattleTech terrain and options for BattleTech terrain. So, the first thing to talk about with BattleTech in terms of options are the hex maps. And I don't know how you all feel about this. I personally hate the hex maps. I think that they are just awful. They take me out of the game. I completely understand the importance of them, and I would never suggest that they get rid of them because it's a very, very functional, easy way for new players to get into BattleTech, because you can just put a paper sheet into the box or the starter set, fold the sheet out, play a game. Perfect. I mean, it's got its function. It's a great like teaching tool for like the mechanics of the game. So I get it completely, and I support the notion of the inclusion of hex maps. But for me personally, as soon as I get them, they go right on eBay, and you get loads of them. You get them with all the starter sets. I just got like the Tuckied like sheets when I got the Kickstarter. They went right on eBay because we'll never use them. The only way that I think that I envisage that I would ever use the maps is if they didn't have the terrain features on there. So if they just like, let's say like on the they do like a rubber product, I think, is it like neoprene, I think, something like that. If they did those that you could like roll out and it was just flat, so it was like desert terrain or grass terrain, and it had the hex maps just on there. And you can get terrain like that in BattleTech. There are companies where you can get that option. And then I can put my own terrain on there. That would be a pretty good option for me. But I'm still fussy, and I still don't even like the hex grids on there because it slightly takes me out of the game. Now, I kind of thought about this. Why do I feel that way? And I think it's because when you're playing a game like BattleTech or 40k, you're basically playing a simulation game. And by that, I mean, like, it's reduced in scale, but it's a simulation of the real world. Ergo, it should be reflective of the real world. Now, I can just about stand, like, having dice and tokens on the board. And if I could get away with not doing that, I'd certainly have them removed. But it's very difficult to kind of keep track of, like, you know, mech evasion points on a dice and stuff like that. You'd have to manually write it down, and that's very laborious. So I'm just about okay with putting, like, say, a small red dice next to a mech when I'm playing the game. But in terms of, like, terrain features and things of that nature, I just can't stand to have anything that interferes with the simulation. It's just me being very, very pernickety. I appreciate I'm probably in the mass minority on that front, but I like everything to look like as real as it can be and to scale, and then I like to immerse myself into that game. Now, just to be clear, there are games where I'm absolutely fine with like tokens and representation of a thing. For instance, Monopoly. In Monopoly, you're not playing like a miniature version of the city of London and moving a small dog around the city. And, you know, you're basically the tokens and the money and the, you know, cards that you play and everything else. It's just representative of the game and the game mechanic. But something like BattleTech, which I find much more personable, because you are literally shrinking yourself down to this tiny size, and then you are commanding those mechs on the terrain. And if there's anything that interferes with that, it starts to like take me out of the game. It's like watching a film that you really like or you're really into, and then something happens, like some bad acting or something in there that just like snaps you out, and you're like, oh, I suddenly remembered I'm sat in my living room and I'm not engrossed in the creation and the art that's in front of me. And that's how I feel about board games. About tabletop battle games, not board games per se. Like I said, when it's just a representative of a thing or a system, I'm completely fine with playing tokens and cards and stuff like that. So what I wanted to therefore discuss is, if you are of that volition and you are thinking, actually, these hex maps are not very good, they look great, okay? So I'm not taking anything away from the design. Like, as far as a two-dimensional representation of 3 dimensions goes, they've done a very good job. You know, there's like, it's very clear on like where the trees are and what the water features are and where the hills are and things like that. It can get a little bit testy, I think, when you're trying to kind of decide on like obscurity. When you're doing like your gator ranges and you're deciding all your modifiers and things like that in BattleTech, open terrain or 3D terrain is far better, because you literally just have to get into position behind the mech and be like, okay, yes, it can see him, but his left leg is obscured. Ergo, if you hit the left leg, it won't count because it'll hit the terrain feature in front of it. So nice and simple. When you're dealing with the 2D terrain, you've got to like picture the representation of the levels in your head. And I've watched some like battle reports on YouTube, and universally everyone seems to get it wrong. It's just like, I'll be watching it and they'll be like, you think you can see me? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, no, you can't, because there are trees on that level 2 and you're on level 2, and it just becomes a little bit of a confusing mess. So when you're dealing with 3D terrain, you solve a lot of those issues. You do have to homebrew some things though. For instance, if you're dealing with 3D terrain, you have to deal with the concept of whether you're dealing with trees that act as basic cover for mechs. So on the hex map, if you're in like heavy trees or light trees, you'll get like a defensive bonus to that. You can't really do that if you're playing on 3D terrain, because if you've got like a cluster of trees set together, you can't get your mech in the trees, so it can become quite difficult. So you've got to have a bit of your own system. Like, what I tend to do is I tend to have like say I put 9 trees, so 9 just singular trees, and I'd leave like a little bit of a space between 3 of them. And if the mech is in the middle of that, they're basically in heavy. And if they're within 1 inch of any tree, it's denoted as light cover. And then I can't remember the exact rules I play now, but it's something like it only counts as light cover and not as obscurity, so you don't have to kind of factor that into the gator equation. So it just, like I say, you have to just figure out the way that you want to do it in terms of like, the game mechanics, because the games are not written for 3D terrain. I think Alpha Strike, which I'm semi-familiar with Alpha Strike, but not really. But Alpha Strike tends to be played on non-hex maps on 3D terrain with bigger forces, so I'm sure that they've got their own kind of rules, and they're probably pretty similar to mine in some respects, so I'm happy with the ones that I've kind of homebrewed anyway, though as I go in I might change them and like amend them if I find a better system. So that's one of the first points to note, is if you do want to migrate from hex map to terrain, there are going to be considerations that you have to factor in terms of what you are going to run as a gaming mechanic for certain situations, and you won't know them until you play the game. So you just get the rule book, play as is, and you'll be thinking, as you're playing through it, you'll be saying to yourself, actually that doesn't work because reasons. So yeah, it's just a matter of experience really. But in terms of terrain itself, and this can then get a little bit tricky, because terrain isn't something that's like readily available in 6mm, especially for like a futuristic game set. You tend to find that there are 6mm gaming like terrains for things like Napoleonic warfare, railway sets, but then you have to ask yourself, like, how applicable is that to a gaming system that's set 1,000 years in the future? Well, luckily for BattleTech, you probably say it's very relevant because technology tended to go backwards after like the Star League era, so it's very, very plausible that you will be dealing with substandard housing and old beat up warehousing and things like that within the confines of a like a BattleTech world or system. So you can mix and match things. In fact, I would go so far as to say the more you mix and match, the more realistic and the more BattleTech it will feel. So you can get like the futuristic buildings, and then like down the road on like the Skid Row part of town, you've got like the industrial section where they've got like big cranes and warehouses and things like that. And that to me would be very BattleTech. It's my one very slight criticism of the Harebrained Schemes game when they did the Urban Pack, which looked great. I mean, they are fantastic. It's really worth getting that DLC because those maps are really fun to play on. But everything just looks so clean. Like all the cities just look like, I don't know, like Dubai or Hong Kong or San Francisco or something like that. Like they've got these big like park spaces and the buildings look very, I mean, they're very like square, but that's actually good for the tactical side of it because it means that your mechs can jump on top of the buildings. So it's good, but I'd love to have seen them put like a different feel in one part of the city, like have the industrial part where everything's beaten up and like the housing looks all grim and substandard, because that's very much a trope of BattleTech. So if you do mix and match on tabletop and you just throw in all manner of weird and wonderful buildings and features and terrain features, because you are on alien worlds, remember? So you can get as creative as you want. Generally in BattleTech, things tend to be quite like standard in terms of like our own like environment. So you'll have worlds which are like lush pasture land, very famously like the Battle of Tukiid, which funnily enough takes place on Tukiid. Tukiid is it's like a real backwater world that does farming. So you're basically just playing in like fields and rivers. And, you know, I mean, let's be honest about it in terms of like accuracy. The chances of our galaxy being like populated by worlds that are just like ours is incredibly remote. But I think just for the purposes of this game, and because BattleTech is a very human game, so I understand why they've done that. They don't want to have like the mass alien like world types because it slightly takes everybody out of that setting. So I've got no complaint with that whatsoever. So you've got to kind of factor in straight away like what kinds of terrain you'll be wanting to run, and you can keep it very standard. I tend to play 4 different types of terrain, and I spoke about this a little bit in my last video, but I do like a pastoral land, I do like a desert badlands, I do a cityscape, and I do like a lunar surface, or like an alien world surface, or a Mars type surface or something like that. And then I've got terrain to match each different map type that I use. Now, and that's enough. I think like I could go and buy like the polar one. I could go and buy jungle. I could go and get lots of crazy stuff. But I think 4 is absolutely fine. I can work around that for sure. I might expand it, but I don't think I'm going to buy any more mats because I've got 2 double-sided, very like good quality mats. And what I might do though is like I could potentially go buy different kinds of trees, or trees that look a bit more alien or something like that, and then play that on like the grass like map base that I've got. But overall, I'm very happy with the terrain. I've got like about 3 big like Tupperware box. I mean big Tupperware, I mean like huge Tupperware boxes full of terrain features. So more than enough to kind of get started on. And what I wanted to really discuss in this video is what you'll need to kind of get underway if you want to do like 3D terrain and move away from hex maps, because there's no standard for it. Catalyst games or Ralpatha, to my knowledge anyway, don't sell terrain. So you're completely at the mercy of other gaming systems or companies when it comes to actually populating what you want out of your like BattleTech aesthetic. So the first thing that you'll need, let's get into the video proper now, I've waffled on enough. So the first thing that you're really going to need is mats. And I use this company. Now this is, keep in mind, whenever I talk about anything with this, I'm based in the UK. So I think all the features that I'm talking about here are either based in the UK or on continental Europe. This company, Warzone Studio, are actually based in Russia. It's in Tver, which I think is just like north of Moscow, if I know my Russian geography. And this is a really, really, really good company. They're really reliable. It takes some, if you're buying in like the UK, it might be quicker if you're in Germany, but if you're buying in the UK, they usually take about a week to create them, and then it usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks to deliver because it's got to go through all manner of shipping coming over from Russia. So it's not going to come to you like a eBay or Amazon level speed, so keep that in mind. But once you do get it, it's well worth it because they're very, very high quality. I actually buy these fabric two-sided maps, which I'm actually on the tag for that now. I think my big fat bald head is at the bottom of here, so I'll try and keep everything towards the top of the browser. You can see here that you can basically choose any two features, and I mean I get the 6x4, which is the £90 one. Slightly too big for what I need. That's slightly too big for my kitchen table, but it's fine. You know, if I ever do decide to pull the trigger and get a big gaming room, they'll be perfect because a 6x4 is kind of pretty standard for a gaming table, and it'll fit on that perfectly. And you can basically just choose two different types of terrain feature. So it just gives you a list here, and they're all like very BattleTechy. You got to be careful with the scale. I did make the mistake when I bought the first one. I got this incorporation mat here, which is too big a scale for BattleTech, so I don't really use it. But there are other ones like I think like that one, this one, Zolo to Grand. You could use that. I mean, that looks slightly urban in setting. Again, they've got some strange names here. Arego. That scale will be too big for BattleTech as well. But I've got the standard grassland one. So it's Homeland, sorry. So it's the one it's got a little bit of like stone feature on there. I've got the Sahara as well, which acts great as like a desert or badland. And finally, I've got one of the Martian ones. I think it's the Ardent. I think it's this one here, which is like the more like red coloured, like not lunar surface, but like Martian surface. And the quality is fantastic. It's like very, very high quality fabric. So it's better fabric than you'd have on like a dining room table. If you want to upgrade, you can also get the rubber variants. These are quite expensive though, but they'll be very, very high quality. And I think that they cost, for some reason this isn't working anymore, but it doesn't matter because they all look the same anyway. There we are. So yeah, the rubber ones are significantly more expensive. So 6x4 is £153, but again, you get they'll be much easier to store, presumably because you'll be able to really fold them round, and they'll probably come in like some kind of like the poster. Like holster devices that you can get. I'm sure it'll come in one of those. The material ones just fold away, but I found that they don't crease. That's why I said they're really, really high quality fabric. So I'd actually advise you go for the two-sided fabric. I think for the sake of £60, I can't see that the rubber ones will be massively better in quality, but I think if you've got like a gaming table that you just want to nail something down to, the rubber ones will probably be better for that. So lots of options on gaming mats, obviously, and there are hundreds of different companies that do them. Another option as well I think you might want to look at are the Games Workshop fold-out mats that you can get, that they introduced when Kill Team came around. I've got loads of those. Now, most of them don't work for scale for BattleTech, but a couple of them do. There's one that's like Now I've subsequently replaced that with one of these maps, but I was using for a time the like Martian wastes because it's just there's no like skulls on there or anything, so it doesn't like this giant skull that you'd have to kind of hide with a terrain feature or something like that if you panic it like I am. There are other like sandy ones that you can get. I've got a couple of like gaming maps for Warcry, which I don't play Warcry, but I actually like a lot of the Warcry terrain, so I've got quite a lot of that, and the mats as well that I use for Kill Team. And there are some variants of that, which is just it's like I don't know what it's like a mud with a bit of like pastoral like foliage on there or something, and that actually works quite well as well. They tend to be all over eBay, those things, so you can usually pick them up for about $10 to $20 or maybe like £15 or something like that. And it'll just be someone that's bought the box set, doesn't want the mat, and is just getting rid of it. So that's a really quite a good option for BattleTech. But again, if you're panicky about scale, maybe not. So, but again, there are loads of places to buy stuff like this. I think you should be looking for these prices. For me, are very very good quality and good price. So about £100 for a 2 6x4, even though it's double sided, is like super high value. So you've got your map. What do you need next? Well, you're going to need roads and rivers, probably, if you're going down the like traditional BattleTech Tuckied-esque farmland or pastoral land like aesthetic. Now, again, this is a UK company called Tiny War Games, and these do an exceptional line in roads, which I bought a few months ago. You can get all manner of different ones. So you can buy the desert roads, you can buy snow roads, you can buy modern roads. I just went for the modern road. And these are amazing. Like you can basically you can decide on your scale. So for BattleTech, it's obviously 6mm. And if you buy the 6mm one, they're not massive. I think they're not, I'm not going to say they're cheap. I think they're about £70 or something like that. And you just get hundreds of them. They just come on a giant sheet that you just have to cut out. They're all made out of this material here, leatherette. I think you can get different types of like material as well, but I went with the leatherette one. What I really like about these is that they're a bit like rubber. So if you're kind of running a road over a hill, it's very easy to just basically you place the roads across the hill and it looks completely natural. They're not like straight, so it looks really weird, like you're balancing a straight road on a like an uneven hill. So these are fantastic. They all come like modular, so you just have to like basically build the road system onto the map. They've got a little bit of weight to them as well, so they tend not to get knocked around. So you're not going to constantly have to like refiddle them back into place. The only thing that I'd say about this that was quite daunting was, and I knew this was coming, they come on these huge sheets. So it just comes in the post in like a rolled up, and you have to cut out each individual road. And I'm not kidding, it took me about a day to do. Like it was really grueling. But I now have like hundreds of road sections, and it's all different kinds of roads that you can see here. So for instance, like on the modern roads, you've got like T-junctions and even river crossings if you need to do those. You can also go by the rivers as well if you want the river equivalent. I didn't, but I'll talk about that shortly. And you can see here we've actually got the different scale sets. So let's actually find the 6mm one, which is here. I don't know if it's... They've only got 6mm for desert, but that's how many roads you get on the 6mm sheet. Yeah, that's a lot of roads. I mean, when you're just playing on a table, I think my table's about 3.5 by 5 or something like that. So I could just fill it with a road if I wanted to. There's lots and lots of options there. And really good value, really good quality. They delivered very, very quickly. I didn't want the river one. I think I wanted my rivers to have a little bit more of a like oomph to them, whereas these are flat. I'm fine doing that on the roads, obviously, because it's just basically like tarmac. But for rivers, I wanted it to feel a bit like part of the scenery, so I got something else for that, which I'll show you in a second. So next up, so you've got your roads and you've got your map. They're very important to BattleTech. Roads are super important to BattleTech because if you get the Total Warfare book, there are skidding rules. So, like, if you're running down a road, your mech can basically face plant if it fails a piloting test if you try to move off the road because you'll skid on the tarmac. Vehicles have, like, the same system. It also, like, gives you options in terms of bridges. They're especially important if you are playing vehicles because your vehicles will go obviously quicker on roads. So do mechs as well, but vehicles are limited in where they can and can't go. So if you've got roads on there, it just means that they've got like an access road to get around the map. Next up, so you've got your roads on the map now, you need some buildings. Now, buildings you can quite easily make your own. I don't make anything myself. I have zero intention of ever making any terrain ever because it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't mind painting terrain, I don't mind putting terrain together, but I just know that I will absolutely not do as good a job as somebody that I can go and buy it for, like a resin printing company, or even if you're buying like stuff like Games Workshop scenery where it's all like modular that you glue together. It will always look a million times better than anything I can do myself, and it's not particularly expensive either. So let's go and have a look at this next company. This is Levin Miniatures, and these are again a British company. I want to say they're based in Hull, which is quite close to me. That's out in East Yorkshire. I'm in West Yorkshire. I think it's Hull anyway. I could be wrong. I've used these loads. I've got loads and loads of buildings for them. They do, like in terms of their product line, they do all kinds of stuff. They do like ruins, they do World War II stuff, they do military, marine, industrial, they do so much stuff. And if you just click on one of the tabs, so we just clicked on marine there, and when this loads up, you can see like there's just so many options here for like docks and like warehouse, port authority admin buildings. Port cargo warehouse, I think I've got a couple of those. Customs warehouse. Now, why I really like this particular company is because they're very, very big, thick resin blocks that you get. Detail's great. They do, the paint jobs on here don't really do them justice, which is a shame. I think if I was marketing this website, that's the first thing that I'd do. I'd go pay a professional painter to make them look really good. Some of this can look a little bit patchy, but trust me when I say that the quality on the resin is very good. Really, really quick with delivery as well. And look how cheap they are. £3.50 each. And it's a big old block. Like that, that port cargo warehouse is like this big. So it's a big chunky model. But most importantly, it's got a flat roof. And that's super important in BattleTech because you can use it as like a tactical thing for jumping your mechs on. So it effectively acts as, if you're playing Cityscape, it effectively acts as a hill because your mechs can jump in it and it's like seen as one level up. So companies like this are fantastic, and I think Levin Miniatures, generally they're going to be making terrain for like diorama. So like if you've got like someone who's into doing like wargaming, like say like Napoleonic warfare, they're not playing the tabletop stuff, it's like, but they're putting little features in there. This is obviously for a modern one, so this might be something for like World War II, like diorama. Also, though, you can use them for gaming. I'm sure people do. Like Napoleonic games are quite famous and have quite a lot of players who deal with it on like tabletop. So you can find all manner of stuff if we go into Napoleonic. Not something you necessarily get for BattleTech. I think that will be slightly too aged. There might be a couple of things you can get in there. And I have had some interesting things from here, like little statues and stuff that I like litter around the map when I'm playing BattleTech. Like you can have the Star League base with a statue out, the golden statue outside it or something like that. Yeah, these would probably be a little bit too oldie-worldy for BattleTech, I think. But lots of options. Again, Levin Miniatures are just the one that I've used in the UK that I've been most impressed with. I've used a few, and they've actually all been fine. I've had no problems with any of them, but I think Levin Miniatures was the one that stood out as the best quality and the most reasonable. And you say reasonable, I mean, if you're going to go and like fill your boots with this company, you'll end up spending like £100 like that, because it's all those £3.50s very quickly add up. And I know it's just how it works, right? Like you'll go into like the section on aircraft, and you'll find all like the air towers, and you'll be like, "Ooh, that would be good for BattleTech." Like you could make like a runway or something like that, and put some like I think I've got like a little airport somewhere in my like terrain, which I can use for that. So Lots and lots of options, very, very good value. And if you're in the UK, I would highly recommend using them. I found far more success with them anyway than I have on something like eBay. I have tried, when I first started out, it's the first time I've ever really collected 6mm scenery. I went and bought some model railway stuff that was just slightly above the scale that I was looking for. But I just bought a couple of testers and it was horrible. It was like really difficult to put together. It was basically created by a company where they don't have the money to like make sure that all the designs fit together properly, so they just assume that you're a really good modeling person and you can just deal with it. I did it and they looked fine, but the scale wasn't great and it felt very flimsy, and I was like, oh, I just don't like these. So I actually just got rid of it. I just bought a couple of testers, bought like a little crane, just didn't work at all. So I'd be a little bit careful with that, because usually people who do like model railways, the hobby is the thing, right? So like generally the hobby levels are going to be much more advanced than something like Levy Miniatures, who are doing this for like Napoleonic scale warfare, where you just want to like plant in the Mont Saint Jean farm there and say, oh, that there it is, and we'll play the Battle of Waterloo or whatever. So just be like slightly wary of where you're going, and I'd try to find like a specific company. If you're in the US, I'm sure there are loads of these. Like you'll probably have them state by state. Obviously in the UK there are a couple, but these are certainly, I think, the most prominent, and the ones that you can always tell by like Google searches, because I know quite a bit about like Google Analytics, and they appear very, very high on that list if you type in 6mm terrain, which means they're getting more hits than people in that sector. So, and I believe you me, it's not because of their marketing, because this website's completely functional, but in fact, no, these buildings are alright actually. Someone's done a good job on the Napoleonic buildings, but some of them look like they've just been spray canned and dry brushed, so they don't really show the kind of great quality that they've got in the resin models. Next up, you're going to need rivers and water. That's a big thing in BattleTech because you can use it to cool off. Now, the first thing that you have to decide before you do this is, and again, if you're going to build like your own specific terrain feature, which is, I mean, you're a way better like hobby person than I am if you're going to do that. If you were going to do that, you can you'd inbuild like rivers, or you'd make your own like rivers, and you'd say, okay, well this one's like deeper, and this one, or depth 2, and this one's depth 1. I just don't bother with that on my terrain. Everything's depth 1. And I've got like a choice of like lakes and rivers. And ages ago, this is months and months ago, I went to buy this river water set on Etsy. This is really good. It's really quite cheap as well. It was, so you can see there, it's £22.49 for the entire set. I think you get, I'm not sure how many pieces. You get quite a few. Oh, here we are. I think, oh no, you definitely got that many. If you get the pack, I think it's basically like, I'm going to guess it's like 15 or 16 pieces. So you get like the straight bits, the corner bits, you get the end bits. And I went and bought like 2 of them, or 2 of the different packs, and that was like more than enough to run like a river across a game board, or put a couple of lakes in there or something like that. Most importantly for me, they had a little bit of something to them. So when I was talking about the rivers that you could buy at the place where I got the roads, it just feels too dimensional for a 3D gaming set. This river set here, it has like embankments, and there's like texture detail to the actual river itself, so you can dry brush that white to get like the foam of the river. And that I really like. Like, it just means that it looks like there is something there. And you then have to kind of homebrew your rules into what terrain you're using. So for me, it's like any mech can sit in one of these points. So like on this straight edge here, a mech could sit in that, and then they are 1 depth in the water. And that's it. Nice and simple. I don't mess around with like if you had like a massive lake and you'd say, okay, well, everything in the middle of this lake is depth 3. And then there's depth 2, and then there's depth 1 where the bay is. I just can't be bothered doing that. It just overcomplicates things. I suppose it's one of the advantages that you have on the Hex map is that you can just write that in, and you can say with what depth it's at, and you can go down as far. You could have like a half of the map being, you could have like a sea, or like a sea coast or something like that, and have some of the sea at like depth 5 or something if you really wanted to do that. And then you could introduce ships to the game, which you can do in BattleTech. Lots of little ships in the technical readouts. But for me, this has always been like a land skirmish game, so the river features are there as a tactical thing for mechs to cool off in. They make good features for limiting where like vehicles can go. It also adds if your mech goes into the water, they've got to do like piloting checks, so you can end up like basically falling into the water like completely with your mech. Obviously then things like you can use it as a bit of a barrier, so like tanks can't just go across the water, infantry can't go into the water, elementals can't go into the water, so you can use it as a bit of a tactical thing. Like if you were playing a defensive map and you had like one force defending off against like an attacking larger force, you can use terrain to obviously mitigate that advantage of a bigger attacking force, and a river would be a good way of doing that. So maybe there's only like one bridge cross point or something like that. So I really do recommend these. This comes from a company called Funky 3D, and yeah, they were great as well. Really, really quick. You can actually buy them painted if you want, and I don't think it's that much more expensive. It's only an extra few pounds, and the quality looks... Actually, I mean, that's pretty similar to how I've painted mine up, so I just bought them nice and grey, and then I painted them myself. But I think for the sake of a couple of extra pounds, it might be worth just getting them painted. Next up, you're going to need hills, and these are a wonderful option for hills. I found these ages ago. This is from the Phoenix Emporium GB on Etsy. They're basically just like really basic polystyrene, but they're sturdy. I mean, like you could obviously snap them in half if you really wanted to. Don't know why you want to do that, but you can do that. They look exactly as you can see there. One little advantage of these, which I really like, and I've taken advantage of it myself, is when you turn them over, they've basically just it's just like whatever this is made of, like polyester or whatever it is, and you can spray paint the back of them, and then you can do another feature on the back. And I've done that. So my desert hills are basically just these reversed. I know I did spray painted it. I put I got two of the Citadel technical paints, and one of them was like the I can't remember what you call it. Is it Astro Granite? I think it's called. So I smothered it in Astro Granite, and then I put one of the technical, one of those that like chips. It's really cool, like technical paint. I put it on all my bases for like my mechs. And I smothered it in like the red Martian one that you can get, and that looks like great now. They look like proper like Martian or desert hills. And the great thing about these is they're so good for BattleTech, because first of all, they're like an inch high, so they're just perfect in terms of the actual gameplay mechanics, because that's seen as one level. But also they're flat, and flat terrain is the best terrain in BattleTech, because it means that you can actually use it. You can jump on it. You can have a battle on there easily. You can have like lance on one of those big sections. It's like super easy to do. And yeah, I think I got quite a bit of this. I think you can get all 6 for, I don't know. I want to say it's more expensive, I think, than they've put on here. I don't know if I'm just clicking on the wrong thing. I think it was maybe like £40-50 for all 6, and I bought 2 sets of them. So I think I've got 12 somewhere in storage. And they are just really, really great. The only downside to it is on the roads. The roads look a little bit weird because they've got like cliff edges as opposed to it being like a rolling hill. So the roads can look a little bit weird if you want to run a road over the hill. But even I can deal with that. It doesn't look too bad anyway because the roads are still high quality. Obviously, there are millions of options for like hill terrain. But the reason why I like these is because that option where, because they're flat on the bottom and flat on top, you can just flip them and then turn the other one into something else. So it saves you quite a bit of time and space to do that. Next up is buildings. And this is the... I'll rephrase that. We've dealt with some buildings already, but this is specific BattleTech buildings. Now there is a company in on Etsy. These guys here. This is Defiance Industries. So I think like pretty. No, I don't want to go so far as to say it's famous, but I'm sure if you've looked at getting terrain, you'll see these. They're specifically made for the Hex Maps, which is an interesting like little feature if you wanted to run that with a hex map. Again, I couldn't do that because you're using 3D terrain on a 2D print that's then got 2D hills. That would just take me out of the game completely. But in terms of quality, these were very, very high quality, but they're very, very expensive. I mean, it's 18 buildings for £90, and I actually bought that. And I'm glad that I did buy that because some of these buildings are specific to BattleTech. So you can see here that like if you play I don't really play the rules for like building destruction because it's a lot of extra paperwork, but it tells you like there are light buildings, so it's got X amount of hit points. My one criticism of this, and it's quite a big criticism really, and it's not that I regret getting them because they look great on tabletop, they look cool, and it's like the modern part of a city. And you get like lots of factories and modern buildings, and I'll say modern buildings, futuristic buildings. But my one criticism is that they've designed them with no flat tops. So all the buildings you can see here in these like schematics, there's nowhere for a mech to jump on, and I don't like that. That's why I went and bought lots of the Levy miniature stuff, because a lot of that terrain is flat topped. So I'm happy to have this like populated in and around the terrain, but I certainly wouldn't be just using it exclusively because it would make the game boring. And again, it's for £90. Would I recommend it? Well, if you're playing on Hex Maps and you want that option, I suppose it's a very functional option because all the bases are hexes, so it fits on the map perfectly. For 3D terrain, though, I mean, honestly, I would have rather just have gone buying another £90 worth of Levy miniatures buildings, to be fair, but I didn't, so I've now got this option. But it's still, again, it's a fine option, and it adds a different like aesthetic and dynamic to what's going on the tabletop. So like I said, I don't regret getting it. It's just that I didn't realise at first glance, and it's my own fault. I mean, it's very obviously there are no flat tops on there, but I think it was like one of the first things that I bought when I started to collect the terrain, so I was kind of just edging my way into it. But again, if we go up quality, the quality is fantastic on these particular like 3D molds, and everything's very much more so than like the Levy miniatures one, which is the Levy miniatures one's still really good, but these have got like individual window panes and things like that, so they just look great. Finally, and how could I not discuss terrain without talking about a Games Workshop product, because they do some absolutely brilliant terrain, though it's obviously vastly kind of outnumbered in terms of 6mm scale. Most of it's just for like standard like 40k scale, but Games Workshop do a line in 6mm terrain in this, which is it's anything basically for Adeptus Titanicus. Now, I was lucky. A few months ago, one of the stores that I used to buy online, like for terrain and for modelling and things like that, it's like a hobby shop basically that do good discounts. They had, I don't know how they got hold of them, so I don't think they print them anymore, but they had about 20 prints in of the Titanicus like terrain. So there are two sets. There's one, and I can't actually find them anymore, so I certainly don't think Games Workshop make them anymore. They might do, but I don't think they do. But they did two sets. They do like a building one, and the buildings look great, as you'd expect from Games Workshop, though it's very gothic, so this kind of theme into BattleTech doesn't really play, and I actually didn't buy those because of that. I went and bought the Levy miniatures ones, which I thought were more, like suited to BattleTech. But the one that I did get was this one, and this is the, like, well, I don't even know what you'd call it, Manufactorium, I think they refer to it as. It's basically just this here, and this is fantastic because although you can't really see it here, it's basically just a giant crane, and I've got like several of these. I think I've got about 6 of them that I've painted up to use on BattleTech, and it's just the best for like your industrial part of a city, or even if you like playing in like the desert, you can play like an old, scratchy like yard, or like like scrap yard or something like that. It gets quite Mad Maxy, and there's an old like derelict crane in there, And the cranes, you can't really see it on here, but the cranes are these like circular structures, and they're wonderful. And I don't know if this particular terrain has got it, but there's like little ladders up the side of them, so you could potentially put like infantry on there. So I don't think it's on this particular one, but I've built it all up now anyway. But you can see here there are like little crates, things of that nature. So there's like scatter terrain options. It's also fantastic if you are wanting to play if you want to play like a lunar surface or something like that, or an alien surface, because you get these little like generators and little like, I don't know what, like they just look like little relay stations or pumping stations or something like that, and they just would look great on like a Martian map, because if you're playing on a Martian map, you're probably going to want it to be quite sparse and like desolate, so you're not going to like fill it with terrain. So you might put like a couple of like hill pieces on there. Obviously going to be no trees. So it's going to be very much like open warfare. You might kind of building those mechanics as well, where the heat becomes really problematic in like a Martian atmosphere. So everyone's kind of, even though it's open world, you can't really alpha strike because you're going to like burn your mech up really quickly. So things like that, the scatter terrain that you get in these box sets are fantastic. Now, I've just looked on eBay, obviously did like a little search, and you can see there are plenty of little sheets of this left. So you can go buy like random manufacturer like Adeptus Titanicus terrain, but I can't find any of the box sets anymore, so they may just not exist, unfortunately. But if you do find something like that, quite pricey. I mean, someone's charging there $40. Not that I'd ever buy from the US, because look at the shipping fee there. I mean, it's just... Oh, no, actually, no, I don't think that is the shipping. That's just in pounds. But usually, if you've tried to look at anything in the US side, it's going to cost you like an extra $30 to $50 in shipping at the moment. So, not a good idea. You can see as well, this has got 103 watches. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure Games Workshop don't make it anymore. So, I've been pretty lucky to get that when I have got it. But if it ever does come back on the market, or they do any like relines in, also reprints for Titanicus, it does look great for BattleTech. Just choose which one you want though. Because for me, I've kept away from the houses, and I went very much towards the industrial side of it. And I think that's about it, to be honest. I think if you kind of went down that line, that will pretty much give you everything that you need. The one thing I've not dealt with, it's important to really discuss this, is trees. Now, trees were very, very difficult for me to get for some bizarre reason. You can find millions of trees, but they're all too big for BattleTech. I did, though, manage to find a company, which I can't find anymore. They were on eBay, and I think they've either gone off there, or they don't sell them anymore, or whatever. But, and I've talked about this in a previous video, because I am very, very fastidious with my terrain, I bought loads of trees that were like big, bushy, like green trees that can fit very easily on a terrain map that's got like pastoral farmland. And then I bought loads of dead trees, and those trees I'm going to be using in like the Badlands, and they'll both have the same like function in terms of you can use them for light or heavy like cover. So, and I've also got some buildings that do that. I got these like tiny little barrels that I mounted on a 2p piece, and I use them as effectively like trees as well. So if you're in the urban setting, you just swap out trees for barrels. So you can do loads of little tricks like that to get your cover and light cover terrain. But in terms of buying them, you can find stuff like that in all manner of places, and it just depends on your taste. Like, you might want to have like the big redwood-esque trees that just look huge. Or you're on an alien world, so maybe it just naturally has bigger trees. So do what you want, obviously. I wanted them to be a little bit smaller, or like to normal size scale, just because I'm really just like placing them. I wanted them to have big bases and not to be getting knocked over every 5 minutes. So if they're smaller, they've obviously got like a lower centre of gravity on the table, and people won't be smashing them all over the place. So it just depends what you want, and there are lots of different options. Anyway, I think that's it. I mean, that's pretty much going to get you started, or there's some options or some ideas to get you started. I'd highly recommend you move away from Hex Maps if you really want to get into BattleTech. I've played loads of tester games. Obviously, with COVID, you can now, but for like the majority of the last 18 months, people haven't legally been allowed into my house. So I've done lots of like testing on BattleTech in terms of terrain, and if you play with real terrain, it's so much better. It gives you such an extra dimension to it. It's so much more interesting and fulfilling, and it actually makes the game run a lot smoother as well, just because you can very quickly see, like, oh yeah, okay, that mech is obscured by this building, right? Just have to homebrew a few rules and agree that, or again, there'll be, I'm sure someone somewhere has written rules for like non-hex map BattleTech. I personally quite happy just to create my own. Alpha Strike as well, you might want to have a look into that, because that will give you some ideas on like homebrew rules, or you can just adapt those rules directly. And I think that's about it. So I think I'll leave it there. And I'll thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.